Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Josh Guerrero here, and welcome to the All Around Adventure podcast. Whether you're joining me for the first time or you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And as always, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on. And I also know that there's a lot out there on the internet these days that's trying to get your attention. But it just means so much to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast. Now, if you are in fact new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is a show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And those will be stories from myself, as well as the amazing guests that I welcome in this podcast. But in this episode, you have me today. This is a solocast. Don't really have a fancy name for the solocast like I used to in the past. This is just simply the solo show. Like I said, I'm going to be sharing some of my own stories, my own thoughts, my own experiences. I'm going to try to extrapolate some life lessons to share with you all today, and I hope you can implement them and benefit yourself in some way, shape, or form. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's topic. You notice that the title of this episode is The Unessential. And this comes from a quote by the late, great Bruce Lee. He said, "It's not the daily increase, but the daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential." And a lot of times, I think when it comes to self-development, you may hear a lot of people on social media say things like, do this, do that, add this, add that, in order to gain success and fulfillment in life. And to some extent, I agree with that. But I also think that it's equally important to discuss a lot of things that you could subtract from your life that could be potentially holding you back from achieving the things that you want or building the life that you wish to create for yourself. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm sure I'll probably do another episode later on talking about things that you can do, things that you can implement into your life. And of course, much of the solo cast that I've put forth in the past kind of go over that aspect of it. And like I said, things that you can do, things that you can add, and so on and so forth. But like I said, today, I want to talk about some of the unessentials that you may be carrying in your life. And these points that I'm going to be discussing today are certainly unessentials that I've identified in my life that I'm going to be working to get rid of. And then maybe this might be beneficial to you as well, like I mentioned. And I'm going to go over 5 things today that I've sort of identified as unessentials. This is definitely by no means an exhaustive list. I'm sure that as you're listening to this episode and as you finish listening to this episode, you may think of a couple of other things that maybe I didn't mention in this episode. And, that's awesome. That's ultimately what I'm hoping to do with these solo casts, just give you something to chew on as you go into your week here, give you something to think about and just see what you can do in your own life. So with that, let's go ahead and kick this off. And like I said, these are unessentials that I've identified. And I think I'm pretty much a beneficiary of this podcast just as much as anyone else. So this episode is certainly going to be for me as much as I'm sure it's going to be for a lot of you listening. And I'm on a journey just like anyone else is. So here we go. All right. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is excessive materials as unessentials. And this is what I bring this up first because this whole subject for this episode kind of came forth just recently when I was telling someone about my Peace Corps experience. If many of you have been listening to the podcast for a while now, you probably would have heard that I was a Peace Corps volunteer about 10 years ago now. And I was living in the West Africa in a small country called the Gambia for 2 years. And when I moved there, the only things that I took with me was whatever I could fit into 2 checked bags in a carry-on to meet airline requirements. And that was it. That's all I really had for the better part of 2 years. And when I actually moved back from Africa following my Peace Corps service, I had less stuff that I came home with than what I took out there initially. And it was a similar situation when I moved to England. Same deal. Whatever I can fit into 2 check bags and a carry-on for the year that I spent in England when I was going to grad school to get my master's degree in field archaeology. So a lot of people may look at those types of situations and just be like, oh man, you had nothing hardly. And I'm like, well, it be that as it may, I didn't have a lot of creature comforts, as I would say, but I would have to say that my time in Africa was one of the most peaceful chapters of my life. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I didn't have a whole lot of material possessions because I didn't really have, I didn't have a car. I didn't have electricity. I didn't have running water or anything like that. But there was a lot of good stuff that came out of that, though. Like, I got very good night's sleep because, I wasn't flicking on a light that was keeping me awake for many, many hours. I wasn't watching TV or any of the sort like that. Well, I didn't have a TV, of course. And so once it got dark, I more or less just went to bed and I got a really good night's sleep. Like, my body and my sleep cycle was literally going with the natural rise and fall of, or the natural fall and rise of the sun. And that was just really, really good. I felt that's just the way our ancient ancestors have done it many, many years ago. And that's really kind of the rhythm that I got into as I went about my Peace Corps service, because I didn't have electricity. And I didn't have a car, so I didn't have to worry about insurance payments. Or if I was buying a car, I didn't have to worry about making, car payments. I also didn't have to worry about paying for gas and, hoping that and dealing with the whole hustle and bustle of traffic, because I lived way out in a rural area. And I got in really, really good shape because I either had to walk everywhere I went or I had to cycle everywhere I went. And maintaining a bicycle is a heck of a lot easier than maintaining an automobile. So that's one of the good things that kind of came out of having less stuff, because and I'm definitely not knocking on having nice things. I like having nice things as much as the next person, but there certainly is no denying that there's a lot that comes with it. There's a lot of maintenance and there's a lot of investment in both your time, your energy, and of course your finances, as we're discussing here. So think about that with this point is like, do you have clutter in your life when it comes to material possessions? Like, do you have like a lot of things that are just kind of like taking up space, don't really add any real value to your life, that you're just holding on to for some reason? And how can you kind of sort of free up some space in your life if you didn't have some of those things? And of course, I'm not just talking about just throwing away everything that you have right now, but maybe be a little bit more deliberate and intentional when it comes to maybe, let's say, buying things. Or could you actually maybe sell some things and get some money and go out and have some cool experiences, things like that. I kind of sort of discussed that in a previous episode where I talked about getting money for travel, and selling things that don't really hold any value into your life was one of the tips that I've just mentioned. So that's what I have for number one as unessential, and that is excessive material possessions. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about here for point number two is toxic people. And immediately when I say toxic people, I'm sure there is at least one person in your life that comes to mind right away that you may consider to be toxic. And that is perhaps someone who just incites a lot of drama, likes to stir up all these kind of sort of things. They may come to like friend or family gatherings and they're just perpetually negative. Like, they don't get along with everyone. They may want to bring up things like politics or other stuff happening in the world, stuff that is like outside of your immediate vicinity and your circle of friends or family. And also people that perhaps when you share your own ambitions or how you're working towards your goals or whatever it is that you may want to achieve in your life, immediately they may recoil and they'll try to reel you in. And then, because they don't want you to outshine them, because they see what you're going, or they see the result that you're getting, but they have no drive or ambition to try to seek those types of things out in their own lives. And instead of them trying to elevate to where you're at, they're going to try to bring you down to their level. It's like the whole analogy with the crabs in the bucket. When one crab starts making its way and climbing out of the bucket, the other crabs will grab that crab and pull it back down into the bucket. So think about that as well. Toxic people in your life. And I won't go too deep into this because I think you can already, when I bring this point up, like I mentioned, you already probably thought of at least one person that maybe you kind of might need to start slowly moving out of your life and surrounding yourself with more, high caliber people that will help you win. All right. So that's point number two. Now, the next point that I want to move on to is negative self-talk. The words that we tell ourselves are very, very powerful. And if you keep perpetuating negative self-talk in your head, well, eventually you will manifest that in your everyday life too. Now, maybe you're in a point in your life that you're just not happy with. And then you probably may be saying things to yourself like, oh, I'm worthless, I'm terrible, I'll never amount to anything, I'm just a piece of crap, this, that, and the other. If you say that and you let that have all that real estate in your head, then it will come to fruition. Another quote from Bruce Lee that I'll bring forth in this episode as well is, as you think, so shall you become. Now, there's a difference between negative self-talk and being real. Negative self-talk is, like I said, just that perpetual, downplaying on yourself, like I just mentioned. But I also think just being real with yourself in a couple of ways, like if you're not where you want to be in your life, well, then that's something that's a truth that you're just going to have to admit. Like if you're out of shape right now, rather than just saying, oh, I'm just a fat piece of crap, or I'm just a blob, whatever the case may be like, okay, I'm out of shape right now, but I want to change that, and I know I can change that. You can see the difference there. One continues down a downward spiral, and another is recognizing a problem that you can find solutions to fix. So think about that whenever you're kind of having those moments where you may be feeling down on yourself, understanding the difference between negative self-talk and then recognizing the truth, and then working towards making yourself better in those cases just as well too. But negative self-talk over and over again, that just keeps, that's going to be a compounding effect. And like I said, it's going to bring you down that downward spiral. That's going to be really, really hard to get out of. And I've had to do this many times in my life. When I was in the Marine Corps, I'll just tell you this quick side story here. I ended up getting put on what was called the body composition program, meaning that I had put on too much weight and I was getting really close to breaking the standards for body composition in the Marine Corps. And instead of just like saying, oh, I'm just a fat piece of crap and everything like that, I had kind of the tough realization that I let myself get here. And being an out of shape Marine, frankly, is unacceptable. Because, if I have to go onto the battlefield and I'm too fat and out of shape to keep up with the rest of my fellow Marines, then I can slow them down and I could get them killed. Or if one of them got wounded and I was too, out of shape to carry him off the battlefield, then that's not going to go very, very well either, obviously. So I had to recognize that, yes, I screwed up here. I failed. But I'm not a total piece of crap. I could do this. I could change this. And then about a year later, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon. So the words that we tell ourselves are powerful. So be very deliberate with the words that you say to yourself and avoid negative self-talk. All right, so that's tip number 3. Moving on to tip number 4. The next unessential to hack away is procrastination. Again, this is something that I dealt with on a grand scale many, many times over throughout my life, and it never amounted to anything beneficial to me. It created a lot of stress and anxiety in my life through procrastination. And this could be procrastination in the form of, well, in my case, what I'm mostly thinking about is my time going through college. Just waiting till like the last minute to do an assignment or cram for a test, only to get a bad grade or to turn in a shitty assignment. And, just losing a ton of sleep and having so much stress over. But this can also apply to just what you want to set out to achieve in life. Maybe it's a fitness goal. And I think one of the most common things when it comes to health and fitness is people will say, all right, the diet starts Monday. Or I'll go to the gym on Monday. I'll do it when I have this. I'll start jujitsu when I'm in shape. You can see kind of like how counterintuitive that way of thinking is. Or also in the realms of travel, which is, like I said, serves as a basis for this podcast in the first place, is that I'll go see those places once I've done this or I've done that. And then eventually, next year turns into 5 years. 5 years turns into 10 years. And then before you know it, you're on your deathbed wondering why in the hell did I not capitalize on the opportunities that I had and go out and did those things that I wanted to. And then you have regrets. So that's definitely something that I want you to take stock of in your life. What are you procrastinating on? What's keeping you from doing the things that you really want to do? I actually saw this really interesting reel on Instagram a couple days ago that I shared on my story. it was, and I don't know if this is a true story, but it was just like a narration with like some, imagery and some videos taking place in the background. But it was talking about how this woman that worked at this one office died, and that her employers had her desk cleared out by the end of the week. And she had like a 401k plan that she was never going to cash in. She also had like a lot of saved PTO days that she's never going to take. And she hardly used any sick days. And so she had a big balance of sick days that she never taken as well. So think about that. That was kind of sort of an aha moment for me, because, I'm a full-time employee. I have a 401k plan. I'm, saving PTO days and sick days and everything like that. But it's just remembering to truly live. And I think going back to this point of procrastination here, I think, we come up with a lot of reasons to not go out and do things, or we say we will do something later on, but we procrastinate on it. So that's why I wanted to bring this point forth when it comes to an unessential in your life, and that is procrastination. Time, it waits for none of us. It's ongoing. Think about like the moment you were born, an hourglass with a finite amount of time was tipped over right away. And eventually those sands are going to run out at some point in time. It's inevitable for all of us. And it's kind of a tough thing to think about too, I know. Kind of having these memento mori moments. But the thing is, and by memento mori, it's Latin. It means remember that you shall die. It's a tough thing, but our days are numbered, each and every one of us. So make sure that you truly live and stop procrastinating. All right, number 5. And this is going to be the last point that I want to bring forth as well. And like I said, this is by no means an exhaustive list. I'm sure you all will think of something at some point. And that is fake food. I'd say probably at this point now, the bulk of the stuff that we will find in grocery stores didn't even exist 100 years ago. It was laboratory made. And it's been mass produced and manufactured. And I think we've kind of gotten away from what sustained life on this planet for millions of years. And I think if I look around, I can just kind of tell we've never been sicker as a species as a result of it. And I noticed this for myself too, because like I said, I was put on a body composition program when I was back in the Marine Corps. And I can tell all of you that being healthy and eating real food makes you feel so much better than if you're just constantly eating a bunch of fake food. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe there's a balance to be struck here as well. I mean, I certainly have the stuff that I really enjoy eating. Like me, I really like chips and salsa. I also really like popcorn and the occasional cheesecake, because I know people who make very, very good cheesecake, and I had just so happened to be one of them. So I'll make cheesecake for my family on a holiday occasion or something like that too. So there is balance to be struck there, I would say. But I do not think that, this fake, heavily processed food should make up the bulk of what you eat. The bulk of what you eat should be real food. So meats, eggs, dairy, stuff like that. And I won't go too deep into this. I mean, there's a ton of information out there. There's lots of people in the health and fitness space that are better at this than I am. If you really want a good resource on that, just go back and listen to my previous episode that I did with Dr. Bill Schindler. He's a food archaeologist, and he discusses this at length and a lot of stuff that he does, especially in his book, Eat Like a Human, which I'll leave a link in the show notes for this episode. It's a great diet and nutrition resource. But really think about that too. Just like getting rid of like the fake food, or at least the bulk of it. And right away, you know what I'm talking about too. Stuff that, comes in a box, comes in a bag, comes in a can. A lot of that stuff has been heavily processed. So just be a little bit more wary to make sure that that stuff doesn't take up the bulk of what you eat. A good rule of thumb to follow is, like I said, if it didn't exist 100 years ago, it's probably not all that good for you. And if it's not something that you could pick, pluck, or kill out in the wild, then again, it's probably really not all that good for you. And typically, when I go to the grocery store, it's usually the perimeter of the grocery store is where I find the bulk of my food. That's where the produce is. That's where the meat section is, the seafood section, the deli, so on and so forth. All right, everyone. So that's all I have for this episode. Let's just go ahead and recap these 5 unessentials that I think would be worth hacking away at your life. The first one is excessive materials. The second one is toxic people. Number 3 is negative self-talk. Number 4 is procrastination. And number 5 is fake food. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure maybe you all may have thought of some things as you've been listening to this episode, but if you did, think of a couple of things, let me know. Hit me up in social media. I'm most active on Instagram at All Around Adventure, so you can find me there and connect with me. All right, everyone. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. Again, I know that your time is important, and it really means a lot to me that you've chosen to download and listen to what I had to say today, and I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly don't take it for granted. And also, be sure to check in next week when I got a brand new episode featuring another fantastic guest. But until then, I'm Josh Guerrero. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful week.